Hi everyone, this is your girl Nikita, and welcome to the Perfectly Powerful You podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Perfectly Powerful You podcast. I'm your host, Nikita, and I trust, hope, and expect that you all are doing perfectly splendid, absolutely wonderful, amazingly awesome, and all those splendiferous things because you are worthy and deserving of living into your best life. And even if you're not there yet, then I'm sending even more love your way so we can do a Pick Me Up podcast and vulnerability podcast together because we're here for a great time. We're here for a vulnerable time, and we're here for a leveling up time. And that is what I would love for this podcast to be all about. At the level of fact, I have started and stopped this a couple of times because I was feeling of the way I would love to go about this because I've been feeling very inspired about leaning into my vulnerability. And at the level of fact, sometimes it's scary. I have lately been feeling this desire to not allow fear to hold me back when up until now, I absolutely did. And there were parts of me that would feel a lot of, I'll say up until now, fear or shame or guilt around not speaking my truth, about not stepping into my most authentic self by holding back when I really wanted to move forwards. And it was just getting curious with myself and listening to podcasts in or and reading books, specifically Brene Brown. For those of you who know her, I'm sure you all know about wholeheartedness, about vulnerability and shame. And she is a fantastic spokesperson for all of that. And because of her wisdom and the way that she has been sharing her story and the stories of others, I've been feeling inspired to share my perspective, to share some of the ideas that have been going on in my head, and to help give a little bit more of a well-rounded view on the subject because I think it's important. I think leaning into vulnerability is a really fantastic tool to feel even more courageous, for feeling even more authentic, for feeling even more in love with yourself, for feeling even more joy, all of the things. But sometimes when you do it, and when I've been experiencing vulnerability, there's been a part of me that did not want to do it. I just wanted to step away from it. I wanted to, well, show up in the ways that I have in the past, which have been like ghosting people, which have been avoiding subjects, which have been people pleasing. It can show up in a number of ways. If this resonates with you, well, welcome to the podcast. And if you would love to rise a little higher with me, welcome to the podcast. We're going to be going into some excellent stories about myself, about some other people that have just been, again, open and vulnerable with me. And I would love to allow a little bit of inspiration for your life should you feel called to rise a little higher for you and to step into vulnerability and to acknowledge the courageousness that really is a part of this whole grand adventure we call life. So, vulnerability, everybody. The first place that I would love to start off is acknowledgement of vulnerability and fear and shame and guilt and unworthiness. Those are all hand in hand. And something that Brene Brown said that really struck a chord in me is that vulnerability at its core is shame, fear, guilt, and unworthiness. But it also is a birthplace for love, joy, and worthiness. And I think it is very funny and also very, of course, that when you lean into the uncomfortability of life, that is when you are going to find deeper levels of yourself. And when you go really deep with yourself, you're going to find the darkest parts of you, and they might feel a little ill, if you know what I mean. They're going to feel a little unnerving. They're going to feel tender. They're going to feel like you do not want to go there. But when you choose to go there, man, it is remarkable. I've cried so much this week. I have I've laughed so much. I've had these aha moments because I've allowed myself to step into speaking my truth when up until now, that apparently was hard for me when it came to certain aspects of me. So, when I'd like to say acknowledgement first, and then I'll get into the story about how I've been showing up a little bit, just to add a little bit more context around vulnerability in a sense or two. But acknowledgement of where you've been feeling that you've been holding back and where something absolutely feels a little bit tender, a little bit shameful, a little bit, I don't want to go there. Like, how are they going to react? How is the situation going to go? What's going to happen? Just this uncertainty. So, acknowledgement holds you back from shining. And I think there has something to do with, again, I'll mention people pleasing or fear of not being accepted, or maybe fear of making a mistake or judgment, whatever it may be. Acknowledging that part of you that is holding back because of one or more or something else related to these topics is fantastic. Because if you think that you are perfect and wonderful and nope, nothing bothers me, I am fantastic in every single way, there's usually something more behind it. And it is because we are soulful beings having a beautiful, radiant human experience. And we, at our core, our spiritual self is perfect, but our human self is not. And that's actually the fun of being human. Sometimes it doesn't feel fun, but it is the fun because it means that we are growing. So when we start to lean into these uncomfortable aspects of ourself, i.e., the fear, shame, guilt, whatever is coming up that is we're allowing ourselves to be held back from, that is where the growth happens. And so acknowledging where in your life that you have been maybe holding back, where in your life you've been feeling a call to rise, where can you sense in your life that you would love to show up where maybe up until now you haven't? So when I say acknowledgement for myself, there was this acknowledgement of totally people pleasing up until now. And there was that part of me that felt very comfortable chatting with people, super comfortable with it until it became something where I felt as though the other person was going to be hurt, where they were going to see me as like a monster. They were going to see me as negative in some way because, well, I'm Nikita, and everyone says, "Oh, Nikita, you're so happy, you're so positive, like you could do no wrong." And I didn't realize until now that I held on to that. I was like, well, that part of me that's supposed to be like happy all the time, that's supposed to be joyful, that brings light to people's world as opposed to just bringing light to my life and then people get to like be a part of it. I realized that that part of me that was holding back from authentically speaking up until now didn't want to have conversations with people where specifically parting ways with people who did not serve me well, where I felt as though there was a connection and I did not feel that same connection. And there was a lot of like love, and I still had like so much love, but there was just like something where I'm like, something needs to change. And I could not show up in that certain way. I had to allow myself to really step into saying, this is not working for me. And knowing that they may not be okay with it and being okay with finding the words, with speaking up for myself. And up until now, oh, I was like pulling teeth. It was like, and sometimes it still feels like where I don't want to say it because this part of me is bubbling up that I really want to like shove back down where I'm like, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it. Like they're gonna be hurt, they're gonna cry, they're gonna be sad, they're gonna be mad at me. And I was just so uncomfortable with holding space for the other person because I was already preconceiving in my head how they were going to respond to what I had to say because I was already preconceiving that they were going to respond in a way that maybe I wasn't okay with, that I had to be okay with no matter how they were going to show up because I can't control everything. Surprise, surprise. That all I can do is control myself. And it took a lot, and it still takes a little bit. I'm going to say a lot sometimes, and that's okay because again, we're on this beautiful journey, and every time you step into it again, like fist bump, high five, little jazz hands and fireworks and all the great things because we're showing up. But I had to acknowledge that there was absolutely a part of me that did not. I would rather ghost people than tell them how I really feel if it was not, positive and uplifting, because I was uncomfortable with it because I thought that people were going to see me as this negative person as opposed to this person who just like for me who just loves myself so much that when something isn't working, it's okay. And I believe that we're given these moments in life that put us in uncomfortable places in order for us to rise. But in order for us to rise, we have to acknowledge where there's a little bit of tenderness, where there's a little bit of, I don't want to do this, where there's a little bit of maybe people pleasing. And for myself, I'm learning to do that. And so acknowledgement, super super important first step with just taking the next step, which is having that dialogue or having a dialogue and conversation with that part of you that is trying to hold you back from up leveling yourself. So having a dialogue with that part of you that is trying to hold you back, I have been doing life coaching for a couple years. Some of you may know that. And I have found, I thought it was silly at first until I recognized the beauty in one, first acknowledging that there's that part of you that is, feeling a little bit of shame, guilt, fear, whatever, and then giving it a name or face or both. And wherever you feel it in your body, sometimes for me, there's like constriction in my chest or like butterflies in my tummy. And wherever I feel that, I have chosen to give it a name. We'll call it Steve. So, Steve is that part of me where I feel like all I hear in like the back of my head is you're hurting them. You are a bad person. You are not supposed to be saying these things. They're going to hate you. They're going to walk away from you. They're going to tell their friends about you, and no one's going to love you. And saying these out loud, doesn't it feel like it? For me, saying it out loud has helped so much. Writing it down has helped so much and continues to help so much. But giving that part of me, like, oh, Steve is talking again. Because then once you realize it's going on in the background, sometimes when you're not aware of it, like Steve is talking, or whoever you wish to name that part of you is talking in the background. And it's the part of you that, one, acknowledgement means you can repattern. By naming it, it means that you give it light. And when they're talking in the background, you are able to pause, recognize it more. So if there is that part of you that's like, we'll call him Steve. So if Steve is just in the background and whispering all these negative things about how bad a person I am for like just acknowledging my truth and for stating these things where up until now maybe Steve was talking and I would listen to Steve and I would close my mouth because I was so uncomfortable with all of the things Steve was saying, and I made Steve's words, the I'm a bad person, they're going to leave me, I made them my truth. And by acknowledging it and then giving it a name and a face and that feeling in your body and having a conversation, meaning, okay, Steve, like, where is this coming from? Why would I think that speaking my truth authentically, why would someone walk away from that? And then you listen to what Steve has to say, or again, whatever you want to name it. What are they saying to you? What is this specific feeling in your body saying to you from maybe a past experience, from a past trauma, maybe from anything that you're telling yourself that you have chosen to adopt, whether or not you're aware of it, that's okay, because this is where repatterning comes in. But we cannot repattern until we acknowledge, until we have a conversation with ourselves or that part of ourselves that is saying all of these things in our head, whatever it is. For me, it's Steve. For me, it's if I speak my truth, then these people are going to leave me. They're going to think bad of me. And for some reason, to my own, I was not okay with that. Or at least up until now, I was not okay with that because I made the way other people saw me so important for how I saw myself. And that's a big one where I didn't realize up until now how much of other people's opinions of how I came across, how I spoke, how I dressed, how I showed up, how I made other people's opinions so much more important than mine. And I labeled him Steve. So that dialogue with myself, naming him Steve, giving him a feeling in my body, acknowledging that he's there. Because if I don't acknowledge Steve exists, Steve is just going to keep talking and I'm not even going to be aware of Steve. I'm just going to think Steve is me. I'm going to think all the words and phrases and things he's saying in the background is me. And I'm going to take ownership of it. And I'm going to continue to hold myself back because I keep re rehashing all of the ways in which I should not speak up for myself, should not acknowledge my authentic truth, should not tell people what is really going on because of all of the things Steve is saying. But once I understand that Steve is not the entirety of me. Of course not. There are so many other parts of me that are feeling very confident, that feel very courageous, that feel very authentic, that feel very worthy of speaking up. But there is, up until now, very dominant part of me named Steve that were saying all these things. But if I didn't acknowledge he existed, if I didn't give him light, if I didn't have a conversation with why he spoke up so violently sometimes, where it's like my mouth would go dry, I would start shaking or crying or whatever it was. And it's because there was that part of me that started to bubble up because it needed to be repatterned, or I'll say need to, but also would love to be. I would love to repattern it because there is, once I acknowledge that this exists, and I started to, and the third one is step into that part of you that is higher than Steve. Because there's that part of you that loves Steve and saying, thank you, Steve, for being there and telling me all these things that I no longer want to make my truth. Because if you did not exist, I would not know for certain deep within me that sense of courage, that sense of authenticity, that sense of worthiness that I know I am deserving, because we need both. It's the yin yang, that there's a little bit of darkness within the light, a little bit of light within the darkness, because that contrast is needed to help bolster the other. But so thank you, Steve, for being here. Thank you to whatever other parts of me that are helping in the inner works, and for you as well. Acknowledge that part of you, give rise to that part of you, go in conversation with that part of you that is, we'll say up until now, holding you back from being who you are really meant to be. And from there, we'll go into also, actually, we're going to pop back a little bit because having a dialogue with that part of you, and this is a Harry Potter quote from Hermione because I love Harry Potter so much. Fear of the name only gives fear to the thing itself. For those of you who know where that's from, welcome. But it really is true that when we hide things and cloak things in darkness, we think they're so much bigger than they actually are because we have no idea what they look like. We just think it must be, well, I cannot see it. And I have this like innate fear inside of it, or maybe innate fear. I've chosen a fear over it because I do not know, I can't control it. But once you shine a light on it, you realize that it's actually so much smaller than it actually was, or rather, that you were making it out to be in your head. So getting comfortable with vulnerability. This is fun. It's because you gotta be comfortable with the uncomfortable. It's gonna happen. And I've said this before, getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, that when we are one, acknowledging, two, having a dialogue, and three, taking action steps towards being vulnerable, for actually doing the thing, for speaking your truth, for making the call, for firing someone, for hiring someone, for walking that path where up until now you were holding yourself back for whatever reason, that's okay. Having a conversation with it allows more clarity on maybe where you're coming from, but also just you got to do it. Actually, you don't have to do anything. It is absolutely your choice. You can continue to hide under the covers and you can say, la, 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 I'm not going to do anything. It is fine. It will always stay there. I do not want to rise. I do not want to grow from this. I am so happy just being right where I am right now. Cool. No problem. Keep doing it. But if there is that part of you that knows that you are worthy of more, that there's even more for you, that you can have so much self-satisfaction, self-compassion, self-love, even more worthiness for rising, you got to know you got to be a little uncomfortable. But don't worry, because it gets better. Because just like speaking my truth felt up until now very uncomfortable, like crying in public for me felt very uncomfortable. And of course, there's situations where I feel more comfortable than others. That's okay. But if there's a part of you that wants to rise, acknowledge it, because you are worthy and deserving of more. But you got to take the steps, because that is how you're signaling to your body, okay, it's go time, baby. And it doesn't have to be big. It can just be little. But it's still a step. And then when you take that step for whatever it is, for me, it was saying, I'm not okay with this. Okay, that's fine. I'm not okay with this. Great. Okay. Hugs, fist bump, little shimmy, and then fireworks. Amazing. I acknowledged that there was a part of me that is not okay with this. What's next? Okay. Why am I not okay with this? Okay, now it's another step. Okay, now it's another step. Maybe it's a little bit of a retreat, and that's another step. But every time you're taking those steps, it's going to become even more comfortable. And I can promise you this, that the universe will never give you anything you cannot handle. So when something comes up that feels like it's triggering you, that's okay. Acknowledge it and then realize that you are so much bigger than this. Call in help if you need, but it's okay to know that you are supported, because you are worthy and deserving of knowing that not only can you and I feel comfortable speaking my truth, because I know other people do it. I see people all the time. They speak their truth and it seems like they don't give a rat's patootie. For speaking their truth and just laying it out. But for some reason, for me, up until now, there was a part of me, okay, cool, we're getting curious. But then when we take the steps towards speaking up or stepping up or doing whatever it is, the thing that you want to do, knowing that you are repatterning your brain, you are adjusting your nervous system, that up until now you felt this fight or flight, that's okay. But for something that you're rehearsing in your brain, that you're saying, this is something that we have to be aware of. This is something that's really scary. Your nervous system's all over the place. And it's like, we gotta like fight, flight, or freeze right now because this is uncomfortable. That's okay. So the small steps are great, but it's small, consistent steps. It's the steps towards that part of you that wants you to rise higher. And just like there's a part of me called Steve that is telling me all these negative things, label that part of you that wants you to rise higher, that knows that it is stronger, that is connected to the infinite. Because we are. There's a force in us that is breathing us, that's created everything around us. And do you think that speaking up or singing karaoke, or going on the trip you've never like been like going on a trip you've never been to before, whatever it is, that part of you is like, what if this was so much fun? Or what if I was even more courageous? Or what if I was stronger than this? Listen to that part of you, grow it, nurture it, foster it. But you're changing your nervous system at the same time as you're integrating this new sense of self. And it's going to look scary at first. It's going to feel a little different at first. It might feel a little unnerving at first, but the more that you do it, the more you keep showing up for yourself. You give yourself, you literally do, you give yourself examples of how you are more than the circumstances that have been presenting themselves to you. You are more than the fear that has been trying to hold you back. You are more than the sense of unworthiness. You are more because you are connected to the moreness, the thing that literally gives life. And acknowledging also that part of you, that moreness part of you, getting in conversation with that moreness, that part of you that wants you to rise higher, and listen to it. Listen to how it's saying, I'm so proud of you. Look at you go. This is scary, but look at you rise. That is so powerful. And now there's a part of me that's also, and hearing I'll say this part of me is also very vulnerable. That part of me that also wants to rise as well, and is feeling also up until now very uncomfortable with crying on camera, because this is new, that this is also vulnerable, that it is okay to know that you are okay. And it is okay to know that you are not okay sometimes. But it is so cool to do the thing like this that may feel like there might be judgment, but there also might be self-respect. There might be encouragement, and there really, really might be a lot of self-compassion. Because up until now, I felt so uncomfortable with crying, and now I'm realizing that it's okay, because these are all just emotions that are meant to come up and be released. So, thank you guys for also holding space right now for that part of me that up until now wanted to be perfect, look amazing on camera, but knowing that when I do cry, that my eyes go red and puffy, and that is okay, because it is still beautiful, because the only reason I can cry is because I am alive, and I think that is very beautiful. Oh, so good to be alive. So coming into a different perspective of vulnerability, because we're doing amazing. And I think that it is really, really awesome that there are so many of us that want to continue to rise higher, that want to continue to see how we maybe set boundaries or limitations around ourselves. But then we say, you know what? What if we were more? What if we could keep going? What if we could actually be even more than what we set out to be? Because nothing is impossible unless we say it is impossible. And nothing is scary unless we say it's scary. We have these beautiful big old brains of ours that have so much going on in them. A quote from Brene Brown that I just came across on my notes that I would really love to share with you is, what makes you vulnerable is what makes you beautiful. Because I think what makes you vulnerable is what makes you authentic. And I personally feel so inspired by those who do not give a, we'll say rat's patootie again, but also they do care, but they still show up, that they, no matter what, even if they look silly, even if they don't like perform their best, because they know that they are not perfect, but it is so beautiful because they are the inspiration. They are the people I look towards, and I'm like, holy moly, look at you go. I'm so proud of you. I'm so inspired by you. I would love to channel your energy And along the lines of what makes you vulnerable is what makes you beautiful is also something she says is that when she was doing her studies, Brené Brown, in the book that she was writing, she was saying that there was a common theme for those who were vulnerable. It was they had the courage to be imperfect. And even though the nature of the podcast is perfectly powerfully you, I also would love to acknowledge that the imperfectness of us is actually what makes us so perfectly powerful. Because again, we're all gifted with this innate, I'll call it darkness, in order for help. Well, in order to allow us to rise. Because if we knew that we were perfect sunshine beings, honestly, that would be boring. Because there's something really fun about knowing that we can show up and fail, that we can show up and be uncertain, that we can try something with no guarantee that it'll actually work out, but still do it and see what happens. And that part of us that I'll say up until now didn't want to show up because we wanted this control, that we wanted this feeling of certainty. Certainty is a feeling, yes, but sometimes it's okay for things to not be okay, and it's okay for things to look a little messy. And I think that is really helpful for and also a reminder to me that when we're stepping into something different, that it's again gonna feel uncomfortable, but it's gonna be so worth it. One of the last things that I would love to share with you is a story and conversation with a friend that I was having the other day that really, really inspired me because he stepped into his most courageous self. And my friend is currently working in a new position, a higher up position, and he was saying that at the level of fact, because he was new, he situated himself at the back. So there are a bunch of little cubicles, and people come in and they just like they get help, they get serviced. So he was at the very back, but his colleagues were like, "Hey, could you handle this person? She just needs, or he just needs, a little bit of direction." And apparently, he was feeling so anxious, so nervous, so nervous that his voice was shaking, that he was just like visibly, like the person also understood, like he was like really nervous. And this feeling overtook him so much that he just like he had to get help, and that's okay. But it stuck with him so much that he said, "Okay, this is something I want to work on." Because I think with vulnerability, you have to want to work on it too. And so what he did, and this is why I'm so inspired, is that instead of staying in the back and saying, "Please don't give me anybody else, like I don't want to, like this is obviously something I cannot do." Instead, he took himself from the very back of the place and he put himself at the very front because he knew if he was at the front, he was going to have to talk to people. He was going to have to work with them. He was going to have to acknowledge maybe some shortcomings of himself that maybe he hasn't learned yet. But he was going to have to face his fears. And that is vulnerable to know that you don't know what you're going to be expecting when people come in. But he still showed up not only for himself, but he showed up for all the other people who came in as well. Because he acknowledged to himself and the people that I'm new. I don't know exactly what I'm doing. This is all a little foreign to me, but I'll do the best I can. I'll help you the best I can. If I don't know the answer, I'll ask a colleague and they can help you, and then we'll all learn together. And I thought, what a great way of going about life. That if you really want to do it, you can't stay in the back. And you can't expect yourself to get better at it, to not be nervous with a situation if you do not do the thing. And so, one, I give a clap for my friend, give him a bump because he's awesome. Because what a great way of showing up for yourself and allowing that background noise, Steve, we'll call him Steve, to say, I acknowledge that there was a part of me that up until now did not feel safe, secure with this. And I choose to step into that vulnerable part of me, knowing I'm not going to be perfect, but knowing that this part of me, I am so much bigger than this. And I know this is something I can handle. Even if I'm not good at it, well, we'll put that in quotes. Even if I'm not good at it right now, but I'm still going to show up and I'm still going to try. And that's where I would love to leave us today because oh, vulnerability is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And for those of you who would love a little encouragement with stepping into something that feels a little vulnerable for you, you're doing awesome. No matter how big a step you take, no matter where you are choosing to show up or how you've chosen to show up in the past, leave the past behind you. It's there for a reason, just to give you a little clarity. But know that the future is the way you want to write it. And you can write it with, I choose to show up vulnerable, knowing I might not be perfect, knowing it might be a little scary, knowing that it might be uncertain, but I'm still going to show up because I'm living this beautiful life that I don't know how long I'm going to be here for, but if I know that I can continue to show up authentically, however that looks, for as many times as I can, even if I run and hide for a little bit, that's okay. But when you want to show up again for yourself in that most beautiful way that you do, in the most imperfectly perfect way that you do, just know that you are the empowered inspiration that people are looking towards, and they in turn are going to be showing up differently themselves. And the more that people do that in whatever ways they want to do it, the greater this life is becoming, this greater this world is going to be, and who knows what's going to be around the corner. But I expect it's only good things. That I expect that there is only going to be even more worthiness within you, even more worthiness in the energy around us. And this world is brighter for those of you who are showing up courageously for yourself. So thank you all for joining me today because it is my pleasure to be here with you to show up a little vulnerably for you. So thank you for holding space. And for those of you who would love even more conversation with me and this growing group, this immensely amazing group of light bringers that are coming together in the Perfectly Powerful You world and podcast, I have a Patreon and I would love to give even more love and light to those of you who love more content, more Q&As, more certainty around a certain subject, and just fun in general. And I'm really enjoying the even more conversations for you. For those of you on whatever platform, I would so appreciate it for liking and subscribing and sharing because I think the more people who are knowing about this, the even greater things are becoming. And I so appreciate all of you who are already doing it because I just feel very tickled for the life and the journey that we are going down together because it's fun. I'm enjoying it. You guys are amazing. But I hope you guys have a super duper wonderful day, and I look forward to talking with you all very soon. Thank you all for joining me today because it's my absolute pleasure to be here with you. I'd love to hear your thoughts about today's content and any inspirational words of wisdom you'd love to share. I'd also love if you would leave a 5-star review on whatever platform it is you're listening to this on because it helps in creating even more awesome content. May your day be filled with only love and light, and I look forward to talking with you all real soon.